Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I am delighted to have my friend Joe, and I'm going to be talking to him about Stoicism and his experience of Stoicism. And then this is an introductory. So I will spend time talking to Joe about Stoicism and his experience of Stoicism. And then I'm going to open it up for anybody else who wants to talk about that. And then we'll take all the questions that you have. We'll go through all the questions. All right. That's the plan. And then at 3:30, we are going to transition to another topic, which actually connects Stoicism with the themes that we are studying from the Bhagavad Gita, Tao Te Ching, and the Gospel of John. And that we'll start that at 3:30. All right. So that's the plan. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you, Shrikant.
Yeah, same here, same here. So, when you were gone for about a week or so, I said, I miss talking to Joe. So I have to talk to Joe. So I
felt like I was, I felt like there was something missing in my life. That's for sure.
So wonderful. So, and the best topic that I could think of talking to you was on Stoicism. Because yes. I know that that's a big part of your life. Yeah. And I have not talked to you in detail about how did that come to be. So tell me a little bit about how did you come across Stoicism in the first place?
So it was interesting. It was a meetup in Philadelphia that I attended. And it was with somebody who had actually presented here, Bill Broadwater. Mm-hmm. And he had led a discussion. And he just exposed me to some of the basic premise of Stoics, of what Stoics believe. He talked about minimizing our emotions, or, not necessarily being angry. And, but then he really hit on one particular point that really resonated with me. And it was that character is the most important thing.
Tell me something. Oh, when was it? When was it?
That was about, it was a little over 2 years ago. Okay. So, and that really hit home with me. And maybe I should just give it a little bit as the reason as to why. I was going through a pretty difficult point in my life. And what had happened was there had been friends that I'd had that I had helped a lot. I put their well-being above mine. And I felt a little bit betrayed by them. And I was in a position where I lost a lot of external things. I sold my house, I had sold my car, and I had always put others first. And I didn't feel like I necessarily got that kind of, friendship in return. So I felt betrayed. And I sat there and I said to myself, knowing what I know now, would I help these individuals again? Would I gave them places to live, sacrificed a lot of my savings for them in many cases so that they could just, get by. Would I do it again? And the answer was absolutely yes. Right? I mean, without a doubt. I had no regrets. And I realized the pursuit of virtue is really what makes you happy. And that's what really leads to a well-lived life. And that is what is worth pursuing. And so I was really in a dark place when I had come to Stoicism, but it reminded me that what I was doing was really worthwhile. And so it opened up my heart from there.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So it's been a lifesaver.
Wow. So when you went into Stoicism, what did you start with? Did you what works really spoke to you?
Well, it's interesting. We started reading books like The Practicing Stoic, and there are some very popular books, and some of the authors that have even been here in the modern Stoic movement. But I would really say that the the change came when we started practicing the Handbook for New Stoics.
Wow.
And which is something that we actually covered here, and it's this book,
Mm-hmm.
and I highly recommend it to everyone. We've covered it in a number of meetups, and it gives you a set of practical practices that you can use to incorporate Stoicism into your everyday life. And it's over a 52-week period, so it gets intimidating, but you take a little bit from each week and you start to change your life, and you start to see the value of being a Stoic is that it's practical wisdom that you're applying it to your everyday life. So one example would be this idea of the dichotomy of control, so that my friends could have behaved in a way that I had, wasn't very happy on how they reacted. And I don't think they behaved virtuously, but I realized that I was out of my control. And then I had actually come across the famous statement from Epictetus in the Enchiridion. And I can actually just read part of it,
Please.
if you don't mind. Some things are in our control and others not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in our control are body, property, reputation, command, and in word, whatever are not our actions. The things in our control are by nature free, unstrained, unhindered. By those not in our control are weak, slavish, restrained, belonging to others. Remember then that if you suppose that things which are slavish by nature are also free, and that what belongs to others is your own, then you will be hindered. You will lament, you will be disturbed, and you will find fault with both the gods and men. But if you suppose that only to be your own which is your own, and what belongs to others such as it really is, then no one will ever compel you or restrain you. Further, you will find fault with no one or accuse no one. You will do nothing against your will, and no one will hurt you. You will have no enemies, and you will not be harmed. And so what I would like to just summarize about that is that a lot of the things that I had lost, they were outside of my control. They weren't mine. And that was something that made me feel like, okay, it really, what do you actually have in this world? And what do you have control over? And the people that manage themselves, some of my friends I felt like managed themselves towards externals, they really were miserable. They were very angry. So they were managing themselves towards things that were not real. And this comes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, that, virtue is real. And I've seen it over and over. And I went, and it when you see it all the time. To be quite honest, I think you are a great demonstration about of virtue, in the sense that you bring everybody up when you're here. You're always happy, but you're raising the level of everyone else, and you're bringing out the best in everyone else. There are times that I've been very nervous, and that you have kind of coached me through
Telling
and
you,
brought
I
me
don't
through.
know why you're amongst friends always.
Exactly, but it really shows. And the modern Stoic movement is just a group of people that are looking to actually help other people, and they are immensely talented, and that's truly kind of, they're pursuing virtue, and it's inspirational. It's inspirational.
So let's talk about virtue. It was interesting. I was doing a meetup on virtue, and this one lady shows up. She says, "Wait a minute, you're talking about virtue? Nobody talks about virtue anymore. This is so quaint. This is so unusual that you're talking about virtue." And it's actually true. Like, there is very few. Like, if you look at the culture, the idea of, saying that this is something important that you should focus on, that's not there anymore. So I think, kind of this focus on virtue is the heart. I mean, Stoicism is a virtue ethic.
Right.
So let's talk about it. First, many people are not that familiar with Stoicism. So let's try to talk about, can you say, how is Stoicism a virtue ethics, and what are the Stoic virtues?
Well, the Stoic virtues are wisdom, courage, temperance, justice. And what happens is that actually, and this is something that while I was in Rome taking my class, that we really kind of, it's hammered on a little bit. Cicero really talks about this. And they're interrelated. And what it provides you with is a way to aim for what to aim at for your life. And you say, oh, that's kind of abstract or things along those lines, but it's really not. If I'm acting just, this is something that I need to focus on. And the reason I need to act just is because it's for the betterment of the people around me, and it's for the betterment of myself. But without it, it doesn't allow you to do other things. So one example I always talk about, and I come up with, is this idea of charity and justice. Like, you can't have one without the other. You can't have charity without justice, because if you're going to be unscrupulous, and the example I give is somebody that you just say he does some work for you, you don't pay him, and then all of a sudden he loses his job, his house, and everything, and you're doing well, and everything is going well for you, and you're walking on the street someday. Can you be charitable to that individual? The answer is no. If you give him money, it's justice. See, it was the absence of justice that actually didn't allow you to be charitable. And that's the beauty. And this is why all these things are intertwined with one another. So just the idea of courage, what does it mean to be courageous about something? You have to be wise. You have to know. You have to understand what you're afraid of. Then you have to conquer that fear. And that's courage. But if you're not wise, you're just walking into fire, and you just really don't know. But these are intertwined. So by having these four virtues as cardinal virtues, you have a way of aiming. This is my default that I'm going to go to is this. I'll ask myself these questions. And it's really an important thing, because then it just, forms your judgments. And so that's where I found, like, it's given me a way of actually, keeping myself accountable to everyone else, including myself.
Wonderful. Let me try to summarize the Stoic virtues in my way, and
Sure.
Tell me what you think. See, the way I see it, way I see Stoicism, it starts with acceptance. It starts with acceptance of reality, who you are. It's like, when you read Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, they will beat you on the head with it, of saying, this you can't control, so accept the fact, accept your limitations is the starting point. And it seems quite, it's like saying, you think you have health, you can't control it. It's not yours. You think you have wealth, you think you have friends. No. Okay. It seems quite pessimistic at once, but it is not, because the whole point is to accept the things you cannot change,
Right?
So that you have the courage to change the things you can. So it focuses you like a laser beam on the core of things that you can actually do. The way I see it, in terms of analogy, it's like knowing you're in a room. Most of the times you're banging your head against walls, not knowing that that's a wall. This is all about saying, what is a wall and what's the door? So you can not try to go through the wall and go through the door. And so that's like, so acceptance and courage is like the foundation of it. And then there are, what do you do with it? You use prudence. That means you try to understand as much as you can about the situation and act based on your rational judgment. Try to apply everything that you know. And you're a social being. So justice is a part of being a social being. One other aspect is a temperance of kind of managing your emotions. So those I see. I mean, I see it as kind of acceptance, courage, prudence, and justice. Temperance is being kind of an aspect of acceptance, something like that. So that's how I see the virtues.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. I mean, because there's the discipline of desire, which is, and that is a form of acceptance. So what do we want? We're not necessarily tied to outcomes. That's a really important point. So that, yes, it's managing our own personal wants in this process. And as far as the pursuit of virtue, another thing that it's Stoics have this, and I brought this up to somebody just the other night, have this reputation of being somewhat passive, that, oh, it's outside of my control, therefore I can't act on it. And nothing could be further from the truth, because it's actually giving you a framework to pursue virtue. In other words, that's the way you achieve happiness. So that if you're going at, if you're seeking justice, seeking to be courageous, and confronting yourself, which is pretty much the most difficult thing to do as far as I'm concerned, that then you're and this leads to happiness. That's the thing that's amazing. I would pose the question to anybody in the audience, that do you really ever regret doing the right thing? And then you may say, well, this person did this to me afterwards, and maybe it didn't work out the way I wanted, or something along those lines. But really, would you really have wanted to do the wrong thing in a particular situation? And I've done things, that are, I'm not perfect, but I've never regretted doing the right thing.
Oh, wonderful. So I want to talk about justice a little bit more, because that's something new that I learned when I was doing a presentation on virtues from 103 Great Ideas. And this is a point that Aristotle makes and Aquinas makes in separate ways.
Right.
What happens is that we are individual, just, this is what Branowski says, we are social solitaries. When we are deciding what is within our control, we are just solitary. We are saying, this is what is in my control. You are focused on you. At the same time, we are social. The social solitary is the human nature. And the point that Aristotle makes about justice is that he says, in some ways, justice actually encompasses everything, because you are pursuing virtues in social context and in your personal life together. In order to be just, you have to be prudent, for example. You have to be prudent inside yourself and in your interaction with other people. You have to be temperate inside yourself and intemperate in how you express your emotions with other people. You have to be courageous in your own actions and in a social context. So what it does is that by saying that you are just, and notice that the ancient concept of justice is much broader than the modern concept. Almost all concepts, including virtue, in the modern times are unusually, they are narrowed down to almost nothing. The concepts of virtue, beauty, art, justice are much larger concepts. Justice in the Stoic concept, in the ancient context, means the right way of dealing with people. It includes, it's not just, I'm not hurting anybody, I'm not stealing from, it's not a negative of a negative.
Right.
It's a positive. So are you being just to a friend? That means whoever they are and what your relationship is, are you doing right by them? Is it a proper win-win relationship? That is what justice is. It includes the highest positive social interaction, not just not doing the negative of social interaction. And in that context, the concept of justice actually requires that you are exercising all the virtues at the individual level and doing it in the external world, because we are beings of internal and external. There is no conflict between them. So all of that is being captured. And that's why Aristotle says that that justice actually captures all of them. The way in which Aquinas thinks about it is that all these virtues flow into each other. He says they are distinct, but they overflow into one another. That's another way of saying this. What do you think?
Yes, I mean, I agree, and Marcus Aurelius really kind of hammers this home. He labels justice as the most important virtue of them all, and it's so true. It's in both internal and external. And we tend to think of justice as something that is just external. But that's a misnomer. It's both for ourselves and it's for others. And so if you think about it, how critical it is to our social relationships. And so one of the things we actually covered when I was in Rome was the book on duties.
Oh,
And
let's step back and look at
okay.
Rome as a whole. So
Okay.
you were in Rome and you were focused on, you were immersed in Stoicism for 3 days.
Yeah.
What was that like? What is that experience like?
Well, it was far and away the people that I had attended the camp with. It was a Stoic camp. That's what made it what it was. I mean, it could have been, anywhere. They made it. Now, it was special that it was in Rome, and I'll get to that in a minute. But we were, we had Massimo, who you had here as a speaker, and we had another professor named Rob Coulter from the University of Wyoming, who does tremendous work with, just a really good guy with prisoners, and just these are brilliant minds. Then everybody in the room really knew their stuff. So I was really I kept thinking to myself, what an opportunity, how fortunate was I to be there. So we were covering Cicero. And so what better place to cover Cicero than in Rome? And so the reason that was such an interesting, such an interesting experience is because, we went down to the forum and you see where Cicero argued. And then we were reading his book and we were understanding, just he's a lawyer and he wrote this book on duties, and it was basically to his son Marcus. And it really focuses on 3 things, virtue, what is beneficial, and then how the 2 things, what is beneficial and what is virtuous, are never in conflict with one another. That's the premise of the book. So that whatever you do, and there's some interesting examples that they provide, but just studying, walking around Rome and then seeing, okay, this is where Julius Caesar died. These are where these arguments happened. You really, it brought a whole new context. And the whole time there, I'm just thinking to myself, and it was my second time in Rome. But my whole time there, I just kept on thinking, how fortunate I am to be there, because, it's easy to take for granted sometimes, if you travel a lot, but a lot of people don't get to see these places. And not only did I get to see those places, but I get to see them with, 2 brilliant, multiple brilliant minds. The whole class was very, very, very astute, and to enjoy it. So that experience, I mean, I know I missed some of our meetups, and I know you had to sub in a few nights, but for the DAO,
Don't
but
worry. It's all on YouTube, and you will catch up.
yeah. So, but it was worth it. That is the only thing I'll say. It was worth it. It was really just, it was a great, it was a wonderful, a really, really wonderful experience. So and then, so anything that I was learning, I was actually just, kind of, it was centered there. It's just, you're taking it in even a little bit more than you normally would. So that
Wonderful.
was amazing experience.
Joe, now the thing is that, there are so many people here who are your friends that
Yes.
I want to give them a chance to make comments about what we've been talking about, ask questions. So you can, so folks, this is your, so what I want to do is I want to open it up. You can talk about the following things. One is the concept of virtue and character, importance of virtue or character. That's one. You can talk about Stoicism, your experience in Stoicism, or you can ask a question. Okay. You can, what I will do is I've found out a new Zoom feature that I'm very, very excited about. This is a high-tech feature that I've not used before. It's a moderating feature. Okay. And I've worked very hard to come up with a name for it. I finally have called it the hand. Okay. So we have the 4 rules. One is raise your hand or type exclamation mark in order to speak. Rule number 2 is keep on topic. Rule number 3 is be brief. And rule number 4 is be courteous. So the hand is what a moderator uses when you find that you're kind of skating at the edge of these things. And so you'll have about 15 to 20 seconds. You don't have to stop immediately, but you have 15 to 20 seconds to wrap up so we can continue, because I'm trying to keep the whole context of the meetup in mind. So this is the new feature of the hand. Okay. It's like, it's a 15-second warning of, not warning, but 15 seconds, just wrap up whatever you're saying in 15 seconds, gives you ample time to wrap up. So it's instead of, it is a high tech because visual is immediate without interruption, because audio, I have to wait a little bit more before I interrupt people, and it is immediate interruption. So this is a high-tech feature. So that's what I'm introducing, new Zoom feature. So many people have so many amazing things to say. I can't wait. Next up is going to be Jang, Rupali, Jeff, Evanik, Sharon, Simone, and Mike. Jang.
Yeah, I didn't know Joe go to the conference. That sounds very exciting. Yeah, so my question is, I think we're also learning a different place about comprehensionist. I think the justice, when you say justice, you have to, based on your own framework of justice. For example, you're talking about the pay. I personally, I don't think that's the only evaluation people get rewarded. So maybe through somebody's point of view, like for example, I mentioned my son did a logo for me, and you asked, did you pay for him? Like, he doesn't care about the money. But anyway, I pay him $25, $35. But that's not I think the reward he learned is more important. So what I'm trying to say is the justice, because people have different framework, so we see justice differently. That's the problem with culture, because in America, we come from different background, different reference point. So we understand justice very differently. I think that's the critical problem we have in this country.
Excellent. So I would put it in terms, I'm going to collect all the questions. Let everybody talk about their comments. Let everybody put the questions on the table, and then we will talk about all of them together. So the question, I'm putting it as, when there are so many different value systems in America, and people have such different conceptions of justice, how do you apply the concept of justice in this context? Next up is going to be Rupali, followed by Jeff. Rupali, you can both make comments or have questions. Go ahead.
So Joe, thank you very much for the presentation. And just like Jeng said, I was very interested in hearing about your visit to Rome and immersing yourself. And I thought, wow, that must have been such a great experience. So thank you for sharing that. I have a question. You mentioned, at the beginning that applying Stoicism in everyday life was one of your goals. And for me, I look at, Stoicism, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and I'm just beginning to see things in the Bible. And I feel like those are things for everyday life. And for me, it is in leadership because that's my role at the school. And how do you apply these four elements to leadership in everyday life? If you could help.
Fantastic. Excellent
Great question.
question. Next up is going to be Jeff, followed by Evanik. Jeff.
Thank you so much, Joe. This was brilliant. I am interested in what you both were saying about, in some ways, justice encompasses everything. And so I'm curious as to, could you say more about that?
Excellent. Justice encompassing everything. Thank you, Jeff. Next up is Evanik, followed by Sharon. Evanik.
Yeah, I really loved the conversation so far. You're doing a great job, Joe. And so the question on virtue and justice, and when you were talking about your personal example, and again, thank you for sharing that about what happened. And you were saying that you would do it again because you had true happiness. So I guess the question is like, so how do we find our true happiness in terms of Stoicism? And not like searching for it, but just knowing.
Can you repeat it again? I didn't get it properly.
No, no problem. So how do we, I guess the question is, how do we find our own happiness?
Wonderful. Excellent.
Using Stoic principles. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Sure.
Next up is going to be Sharon, followed by Simone. Sharon.
Yeah, so I wanted to speak to Joe's comment about how one never feels bad about doing the right thing, but does when you do the wrong thing. And I think that's true. I think when someone does something wrong, it erodes at their own character, even if it's just subtle, because, we know there are people in the world who tend to do bad things. But I notice people sometimes will internalize it when they'll turn on themselves. And then there are other people, like I'm mentioning, people who tend to have more of a negative approach to life who will externalize it, take it out on others. So I wondered if Joe had any additional comments on that.
Very good. Externalization versus. Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Next up is Simone, followed by Mike, Brian, Judy, and Judy. Simone.
Hi. I'm like Jeff too. It's been a while and I'm glad to be a part of this group. I'll try to keep it brief. I'm long-winded. I'm an Army brat. And so, special forces, special operations is something in their training. My dad, was in the military, but divorced in the military. And thank you for sharing your experience. But do you feel as a man, somehow Stoicism is a self-defense mechanism sometimes? I know as a woman, I'm married, and I think my dad's training rubbed off on me and my brother in our relationships. And I'm starting to see that after 14 years, and my husband was former military, that I think a lot of marriages end and people don't realize how hurt, and you kind of go numb from what I hear. So
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Is it a self-defense mechanism? Thank you. Next up is Mike and Brian. Mike.
You think I have anything nice to say, Bullock? You have another thing. All kidding aside, I'm not sure if you realize personally how much your dedication to Stoicism comes out in your conversation. The first time you and I spoke on the phone, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2 hours and 45 minutes. And you kind of led the discussion from one place to another. And then I don't know how many hours we've spent on the phone since, But what I've noticed about you, Joe, and I'm starting to learn about Stoicism through this observation, is that you kind of speak without agenda other than the Stoic principles that you're talking about here today. And I find that kind of rare, because it seems like in this world today, you get bombarded from so many different angles from people, and it feels like there seems to be a bit of agenda attached to the conversations. I never feel that with you personally, and I'm sure other people who follow these Stoic principles probably come off the same way. But just in a nutshell, I think you should pat yourself on the back, because that pursuit has led to some amazing conversations that I've got to enjoy. So thank you, Joe.
So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is going to be Brian, followed by Judy. Brian.
So I have spent a little time on, not much, but a little time on Stoicism and Virtue. In my third year Latin class, we read Cicero, including parts of the duties, and it was very interesting. I liked it. And then I taught, when I was teaching business ethics at business school, I did cover different schools of ethics, and one of them was virtue. And I'll just share with you the summary I made of virtue. We talked a lot about it, but I included this summary, which might be a quip, if you want, about virtue ethics. Some people say virtue is its own reward.
Yes.
And I emphasize to my students that sometimes virtue is its only reward. And they all kind of like that. But I think that's true. And if you're comfortable with that, then yeah, I guess you're a virtue ethicist. And I think you can and should be comfortable with that. I think that's the way to go. I don't want to comment a long time, but Evan Eek's question, how do you know that you're happy? I think that it's just through experience. There's
No, don't try to answer that. We're going to have time to answer all the questions.
Okay.
We'll have plenty of time. We'll answer all the questions, but let's go one by one. Thank you, Brian. Did you want to say anything more, or that's good?
No, I just wanted to share that little summary because my students liked it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. Next up is Judo. I was saying Judy and Hugo. I said judo. No, it's Judy followed by Hugo.
Okay. I want to follow on what Mike said about that your stoicism comes out through your conversation, and that you should give yourself a pat on the back, Joe, because you did that to me back then in Dante, when I said that my grandson was going through problems, and you said if he's reading Dante, he will be all right. And that just calmed me to an extent so great and so profound. So I wanted to thank you for that comment, and also ask you, what virtue is that when you have that compassion to help others in their pain, to make them feel better about themselves, their family, their pains, and other people. What is that a virtue? Is that wisdom? I don't know. If you can comment on that.
Excellent question, Judy. Next up is going to be Hugo. Hugo, go ahead.
Thank you, Shrikant, and thanks, Joe, for sharing your experience with Stoicism and your trip to Rome. That event actually, I'm a member of the I guess it's the New York City Agora. So I got a So I was aware of that event, and I really wanted to attend. I tried to practice Stoicism for a couple of years now. I've been on and off. I got the Handbook for New Stoics, the book by Massimo Pigliucci, and since you mentioned that, and I can tell that Mike put it so beautifully, that you're a embodiment of this principle in a person, and that you made those principles come to life. And my question is, what was the best way of reading the handbook? I tried, and I didn't finish it. I didn't go through all the 52 weeks, but I would like to know your experience, trying to put those principles, into practice. And thank you so much again for sharing your experience.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Hugo, can you please repeat the question one more time for me?
Sure. My question for Joe is about the book, A Handbook for New Stoics. What's the best approach? What's the best way to put those principles into practice?
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take all these are amazing questions, amazing topics. So I'm going to pose them as topics, and I'm going to welcome anybody to talk about this because these are general topics. Okay, and I'm going to look at general, kind of more general topics first, things that would be very interesting for us to talk about. So I'm using all kinds of criteria to choose the order, and then we will go through as many of them as we can. The first one, I'm going to take Judy's point about compassion. Okay, where does compassion fit in virtues, in the virtue ethics? So folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. I will have Joe go towards the end of anybody who wants to speak. So I want everybody to be able to speak on it. Is that okay with you, Joe?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, because I want to hear what everybody has to say. And Joe, it turns out that a lot of people like you, not just so I'm in good company here. I'm glad to find.
I can't tell you that makes me feel that it gives me a lot of energy.
Thank you. All right, folks. So the question is, what is the role of compassion in virtue? What is the role of compassion in our lives? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to share. We'll start with Rupali. Rupali, go ahead.
Compassion is understanding where the other person is coming from and to know that they have something divine in them that we have, whether we look at Louis Sullivan's idea or that there's the creative spirit in everybody, or we look at, Tao or Bhagavad Gita. And when we view others that they have the same spirit in them that is in us, then when we deal with them, whether on an everyday basis or a one-off meeting, then we're going with the understanding of getting to know, trying to understand, rather than just reacting. And so I feel that using the wisdom to acknowledge and see what is, and not just reacting, is the big part that compassion plays.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. Next up is Jen.
Oh, so yeah, I see compassion as kind of like the energy. When you have this passion or compassion, you have this energy, so you want to do things for other people. That's my feeling about it. You can feel, you can feel they're part of you as a bigger system. So you really want to help them. In a way, it's not like doing things for them. It's like you're helping them as part of this group.
Wonderful. Next up is going to be Brian, followed by Joe. Brian.
Yeah, so I chimed in before Chang did, and I could not have, she said basically what I was thinking, probably better than I would have put it, but I'd say it's on the kind of the compassion's on the same axis as the justice. It kind of brings all these other virtues into play in our interactions, but I really like the way that that she put it.
Thank you, Brian. Joe.
So yes, I mean, so part of being Stoic is this discipline of action, and it's about how you interact with others. So this is really important for a number of reasons, is because once you're doing something for someone else, you're getting outside yourself. And that is the reward, is that you're not thinking about your own problems. You're thinking about, you're knowing that other people are going through things. I always kind of know I'm not in the best place when I'm starting to think about myself and less about other people. That you really are being turned in on yourself. And I have been turned in on myself in the past. And it's that, to me, you could write the Inferno about that, because that's hell. When you only are thinking about yourself. So this is something also, again, it's part of justice, as we said, but it's also, this is where virtue actually is its own reward. And here's the thing, I truly believe everything, I said. When I said that to Judy, I really meant it, that we all go through these tough moments in our lives. But, your grandson was in high school and he's reading Dante. And that's there's not a lot of people that do that. And so that he just needs to figure it out. And so and I've talked to Jeff about this quite a bit as well, is I always felt like the best thing that you could do is, one, bring a smile to someone's face, but to just do a little thing to let someone know it's going to be okay. And if you do that, then comes back to you, and there's really no better reward. And it can be the smallest thing in the world. I mean, I've had people do just very, very small things. And it's really just changed, my perception on the world. And I'm going to embarrass you, Shrikant, in a way that, yes, you do it. You're always smiling. It's a little thing. And but you're also really excited when you hear something that maybe you don't know, or you see somebody do well. And that's a really big thing. That's a welcoming environment. That's a little thing, but you're getting something out, and everybody else is getting something out of it. So, and I do see it as a form of justice.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. So I want to connect this to the other question about the larger concept of justice.
Okay.
And really the best formulation I have really seen about this is from Bhagavad Gita, the Indian concept of namaste. See, when you're saying namaste, right? Yeah. What you're saying is that the God in you, imagine the God right in your heart, right behind your heart. The God in me greets the God in you. Look at how profound that is. Okay, what it is saying is that I respect your soul. I respect who you are at the core of your being. I greet you. Now that conception of justice is very profound. It includes all the other conceptions. It includes that I will do no harm, which is what kind of most of the modern concept boils down to. It includes compassion. It includes empathy. It includes respect. It includes acknowledgement of the sameness in us at the deepest level. And it provides a foundation for human interaction, which is so much larger and broader and deeper than any other concept. So that's how I think about it. And then all these other things that you do with other people are included, because it doesn't matter, because I'm greeting the God in you, it doesn't matter what you know. Maybe you know something more than me or less than me, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter about your physical state doesn't really matter, because you're just, establishing the connection between two centers. And that's very profound. Next up is we're going to take a question. Oh, Sharon, you had something.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that because I was actually thinking about this and thought it was a little bit too far afield, that maybe compassion is really driven by an empathy, by the acknowledgement that we're all one, which I know is for many a difficult concept. And especially Stoicism, when I talk about it to people who aren't Stoics, it's they'll respond with more of that's a very clinical way to go about life. And so, but I agree with you. I think that really compassion and empathy, that it comes from a really deep place where you're acknowledging or recognizing that we really are all one, and it's almost at an energetic level, the energy level.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, folks. If anybody else wants to comment on this.
And cosmopolitanism is very big in Stoicism as well. So I just want to mention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way in which Stoics express that is cosmopolitanism. Can you just talk a little bit about the notion of cosmopolitanism?
Yeah, no, that we all see each other as the same, and that we're one with each other. So that this is the idea of being pro-social. Their Stoics are very pro-social, and a lot of the practices that they have are about helping other people and being open to other people. So I think it's really, I mean, it's a misnomer. It's unfortunate misnomer that.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Brian, followed by Evanique. Brian.
Well, I just thought of the words that describe what Jeng added to my thinking with this in her explanation of compassion. And it's a power, it's a drive. Yes, it's on the axis of justice and interpersonal relations, and it can be from center to center, but the compassion is really, to me now, based on what she reminded me, is what compels you to go out, to be open and go out, and to move along that axis, move towards other people's centers, not just to be there, but to move out towards others.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. Next up is Evanique.
Yeah, when we were talking about compassion and when Joe was talking about it, I was thinking of, why people don't exercise it more, because even though you're getting out of yourself, you get more from it than, you give out. And the one thing I was thinking of is hurt, right? People have been hurt, people have been betrayed. And I think when you think about the hurt and the betrayal, you're looking inward, like Joe was saying, like you're kind of going inside of yourself, and that's a personal help. And if you're focused on outward, even though you still may get hurt, if you're focused outward, you know that you did the right thing. And that's why compassion is so important, is that you are recognizing. And when someone hurts you, you have to recognize that there's pain in them that would allow them to deliberately hurt you. So,
yes.
And like you were saying, oh, sorry, did you want to say something, Joe?
No, I just said yes. I'm sorry.
And no worries. And like you were saying, Shrikant, namaste, seeing the God in the other person, and seeing the God in yourself. It's almost like if you're not compassionate, then you're not seeing the God in yourself, and you're not acknowledging who you are. So I love the concept of Stoicism, even though I'm like a 2 on this scale, because it focuses on, duty and virtue, and instead of like internal, like going inside of yourself and focusing selfishly on yourself and putting up a wall. I think you get much more from life if you drop the wall.
Wonderful. And I would say, because the concept of virtue remains the same, even if you don't know much about Stoicism. Like if you are focused on virtue in any tradition, you will see a lot of you will actually grasp a lot about Stoicism than people who have been studying Stoicism for a long time, but don't really have this concept of virtue ethics internalized, because it's a way of thinking, it's a way of being. Next question is going to be Evani's question on happiness. How do we find our happiness? What's the connection? What is the relationship between virtue and happiness? If you'd like to comment on that, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Okay, we're going to start with Brian. Brian, go ahead.
So I did have one comment on that, and that it's, I think that how do you know you're happy? Well, that's partly just through experience of trying out different things. And if you come back, I think that to me, the point is that pursuing the virtues as outlined, as we've outlined in this group here, is the most reliable way of being happy. And that if you pursue other things, you'll find that it may or may not contribute to your happiness. And if it does, it's more for a short period. So it's that can tie into other schools like avoiding anger and desire and all of these kinds of thinkings. But I think that to me, that's really it. It's the most reliable. And through experience, you'll discover that's the highest.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Zheng, followed by Simone. Zheng.
Yeah, actually, I was researching on this for a while ago. Then I read a lot of books on the Dalai Lama and all this talking about happiness. And then they actually mentioned a very interesting thing about, how when we make the median income, the money no longer make our life happy or not happy, which is like 80,000 at a time. So I think my understanding of happiness right now is it's about your energy level. When we feel bored, usually it's when we have more energy, we don't know how to consume, then we feel bored. Then we feel depressed, maybe we don't have enough energy to deal with the things we need to deal with when we're depressed. That's my understanding. So the happiness is kind of the media, then your energy is directed in the right way, and it's just right. You don't have you need to consume a certain way, and you don't overuse it. So that's my understanding of happiness at this point.
Thank you. Simone, what do you think is the relationship between virtue and happiness? Simone, you need to unmute.
Hi. Sorry. The relationship between virtue and happiness, in my opinion, I'll just go off my experience. Family is first when it comes to what virtue is, and also family is happiness. To me, I don't know. It's okay. The lady before, I'm
Okay.
part, right. My family is very blended. So I have Japanese family, and I go to Chicago every year and go to Chinatown. It was really scary going last year. But one thing that I could see was they said that although there were no tourists, that family unit of having to be back home with grandma or grandma or yaya, grandpa, it made them more closer as a community. And so even for me, my grandmother is how I define happiness. Laughter. Someone mentioned smiles. It doesn't necessarily have to be church. Being military, my dad just respect people, and they might respect you back, no matter what color, creed. But yeah, to me, family and love is very much virtuous.
Thank you. Thank you, Simone. Joe, first, no, wait a minute. Jeff, followed by Joe. Jeff.
Well, it's a great question, and I think that the relationship might be wrapped up somehow in that each of us does seem to know that character is destiny. That we do seem to know at a deep level, that character includes, compassion, this recognition that we're human beings having a spiritual experience. It recognizes collaboration, that we can co-create solutions, and confidence that we can keep moving forward together and figure out what to do next. And curiosity, there's so many things I don't know that can be discovered, and just the courage, to give my best to doing the right thing, even if it feels scary or hard. Those are all wrapped up in character. And if we believe character is destiny, then I think we will feel happy when we feel like we're acting according to our highest character. And when we feel like we're not, happiness will be very difficult to come by.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Great point. Next up is Judy.
I think happiness is overrated. It's been used like that movie or program called Queen for a Day. You're happy for Valentine's Day. You're happy for Happy New Year Day, happy birthday, happy this, happy that, and then you're happy for a day because everybody's paying attention to you. Everybody gives you gifts and everybody's hugging each other, but the next day, nothing happens. Everything goes back to normal. So we've been practicing in our meditation class that I have, instead of saying happy or whatever, we're using may you be healthy, may you be wise, may you be courageous, may you be whatever it is that you wish for that other person, instead of may you be happy. We're trying to use other words instead of happy. I'm not saying that this is going to disappear, but I think that we need to kind of like maybe find synonyms of what happiness means and what it is that you wish that person. That's what I wanted to say.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Next up is Cheryl.
I think the other virtue that happiness is tied to is justice, because I think we learn from a very young age when we're taught to share that if we feel that something is unjust or unfair, that leads to immediate unhappiness. And that's hard to get over. And I think we carry that into adulthood, the sense of fairness and how closely that's tied to our personal happiness.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next up, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it from this other perspective. If you don't target virtue, what are you going to do? What are you targeting? You can target something like your own personal pleasure. There are philosophical schools that do believe that, but I don't believe that's something that's sustainable. And I also look at if you act in the opposite of virtue. Let's just say you do something wrong. Are you going to be happy about that? I mean, that's so for Stoics. The reason you seek virtue first, but happiness is the reward on the other end. So I think and that's what resonated with me and why I shared my story. I looked back at some people that maybe, that were really unjust to me. But given the circumstances or the situation that I was in, would I have really wanted to throw them out on the street and give them no place to live? Would I have been happy if I'd done that? Would I have been happy that, I didn't give them my car when they didn't have one? Would I have been happy if, I didn't help pay their bills and so that they could actually have the credit to get a good job? Afterwards, I didn't regret any of it. And despite them not reciprocating. So I would have been probably, and let's just say I didn't do those things, I would have been upset. I would have wondered about what happened to that person. Should I have done it? Why didn't I do it? And so, and that's something where I think that we have to look at the alternative. If you don't pursue virtue, that's the most important thing, is you don't do the right thing in a particular situation, then you're not going to be happy. And that's my belief.
Thank you, Joe. What I want to do next is I want to ask a question, because this is something that Hugo brought up about the handbook of
Right.
New Stoics. That's actually a very interesting idea, of saying that the handbook. It reminds me of Ben Franklin's list of virtues and his
Right.
plan of actually, executing those, and not just executing, but internalizing those. So can you talk a little bit about the handbook for the New Stoics and how it helped you internalize the Stoic virtues?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, it gives you a set of practical exercises that you can implement in order to really start to see the benefits of Stoicism. Now, there is an example. One easy example is that you say, fate permitting, about something that's outside of your control. So say I'm going to, go meet Mike for a drink later on tonight. I would say fate permitting. And the reason I would say fate permitting is because I know that it's outside my control. And then all of a sudden I'm not tied to that outcome. And this is one of the exercises.
I traveled a lot in the Middle East. Almost everything is, you start with saying, inshallah. That is exactly the same.
Yeah, yes, exactly. God's will. And you start to say these things, and what it does realize, what you realize is, okay, it's outside of your control, and then you don't have this expectation. And that's just one small example. Now, in the beginning of the book, they give you chapters, they highlight chapters that they feel are critical to practice. I can tell you 1 and 2 are critical to practice because it's both the dichotomy of control. There are other, I don't have, I could look it up. I forget what page it is. But
folks, I just want to say something, that if you go to 52 Living Ideas, and Evanik, if you could do me a favor and find that, the Stoic list, the Stoic playlist, we actually, Joe and several other people, including the author, Greg himself, we did an entire course on that. We went through it. We didn't go through all of them, all the exercises,
right.
but we went through a really good selection of them that the author recommended. Greg, I talked to Greg and said that, okay, if you wanted to do like 12 meetups, which ones would you pick? And he came up with a list, and those are the ones that we've done. So it's a very good example of people talking about what each of these virtues are, how do you practice them, and then in the next time we would look at people's experience practicing those in the previous week. So I definitely recommend that. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that list is fantastic, because I think we covered in the course of those meetups, how our value judgments, how to question our value judgments. And I think that that's one of the most important things, that if I were going through the handbook, changing our language, not catastrophizing things. These are very practical things that are actually used in cognitive behavioral therapy. So they're proving out in the psychological sciences that you can use, that actually help you, interact with others in a much more social and actually much more just way. So when you're going through the handbook, I mean, it is intimidating. So you see 52 weeks, but there's a page in the beginning where they highlight the most important weeks that are really kind of critical. And I would look to that, and I'll try and look for that. I actually have it here. So I mean, it's broken down between the discipline of desire, action, and assent, and they have 9 weeks outlined that they would suggest that you follow.
And we have done meetups on each of those 9 weeks.
Okay.
We have meetups, detailed meetups on each of those 9 weeks, where either the author, I think one of them was done by Massimo, 2 of them were done by Greg. So both the authors participated in it. And for the rest of them, they recommended which ones we should focus on. So that's a really, really good, resource. I want to say one thing, that it is actually very unusual because most people think of virtues or philosophies as something that you just read and then somehow implement it. What this book does is that it tries to convert that into almost a technology of saying, in order to internalize this, what exercise would you do every day for a week to really understand what it means to be doing that, to be following that virtue, and it will remain with you. So if you have any questions about the handbook, about the experience of doing it, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Prakash, you're next.
Yes. Actually, I joined this session very late, just a few minutes back. And the first thing I heard is Shrikant, you asking virtue and happiness, what do you think about it, right? And I think that's, though I joined late, I think there is something that I can share with you guys.
Please, go ahead.
So, so from what I understand, from a science point of view, happiness can be measured by 4 chemicals. Okay, so top of my head, I think
let's do one thing, Prakash. We've established a long context for this one. This is going a little bit away from the main topic that we've been discussing. So I will have you, what we'll do is let's continue with the plan of the questions that we have already, people have already posed, and we will go through that. Okay. Thank you. Next question we will look at is building a little bit on what you said, Joe. This is what Sharon asked. Can you elaborate a little bit about saying that you never regret doing the right thing, and external versus internal impacts of doing the right thing? What does it do? What does doing the wrong thing do to you internally? What does doing the right thing do to you internally? And the same thing externally. And any thoughts on that? And folks, if you have thoughts about this, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that I thought about quite a bit. When you maybe do something that is not virtuous and selfish, then it kind of, you're starting to think more about yourself. If that's, and this is my experience, and then that you're slowly turning in on yourself. And where if you get outside yourself, and this has been proven in science as well, as far as anxiety is concerned. When you get anxious, the more you get outside yourself, the better off, the more healthy you're actually going to be. So this idea that you start to, and I hope I'm answering, and if I'm not answering the question that you wanted me to answer, Sharon, feel free to rephrase. But essentially that I look at it as anytime that we start to only look inward, as opposed to looking around us and becoming aware of the people around us, that we're doing ourselves a disservice. And that's part of Stoic mindfulness as well. They talk about philanthropy and for other people as being very important, not only for for the other person, but for yourself. And I believe that to be true, is that again, that's, and it kind of gets back to a Louis Sullivan concept, to tell you the truth, the inverted self. But I won't go down that. That's a little far off, but.
Thank you. Next up is Jen. Jen, go ahead. What are the internal and external consequences of doing the right thing versus the wrong thing?
I actually have a little bit disagreement about this, because I think the right thing, my understanding of Joe's situation is, Joe is a very nice person. He understands humanity. Maybe, I think I share, when we have this Thanksgiving dinner with a professor, and he invited this single mom, and the kids, his kids are very nice and friendly, and the other kids was very, like they're all making all these faces. And I learned, like maybe it's not you did the right thing. It just maybe you don't understand the human nature, like the Tao, So it's not like we are not doing the right thing, but we have to know what we deal with. I believe human naturally are good, but some people, when they experience all this bad experience, they form this twisted understanding or way of dealing with other people. That's why we found that the rich people grow in a nice environment, they are very nice and banal. And then people grow in a very harsh environment, they become very actually angry and evil in some way. So if we understand the Tao, we know what we do with, we will expect the result. So it's not like we are not doing such thing, but we have to prepare the consequence if we understand the nature of the human better. That's my understanding.
Thank you. Thank you. Last question, Joe, I want to definitely come to is that of leadership.
Oh, yeah.
How do these Stoic principles help you in leadership? Go ahead.
I mean, I think they're essential. I think they're essential for any type of leadership, because you're not going to want to follow someone that isn't doing the right thing. I mean, people do, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily something that people gravitate towards. But more importantly, I think that the way Stoicism really helps in a practical sense in this area is how we form our judgments. We don't make value judgments about things. We try and look at things as objectively as possible. And when you take the emotion out of your decision making, not necessarily the compassion, but the emotion aspect of it, I think that that really does help you in how you make your decisions. And people then in turn will trust you with the way you make your decisions as well. I mean, I can think of some people that I've worked for, and I could honestly say that I said, you know, they never said a bad thing about anybody. They just always were saying, you know, they, whatever it is, they made it work. Whatever situation they were given, they made it work. They were very exact about the situation. They, you know, understood it. And that's a very Stoic way of approach, is not calling something good or bad. It's you know, it's just something that you're dealing with. And I think that that's really important when you're leading other people, is that you don't necessarily you make value judgments, but you don't necessarily make they're not emotional ones. They're just based on reality. So I think it's very helpful in a number of ways. I also think that if your actions, and Rupali is actually a great example of this, she's teaching, you know, she's doing something virtuous by nature. So, I mean, I think that that is something that a lot of people would want to get behind. And so I think that that's something that's really kind of, that's important. That's important to be virtuous and to be a leader. But I understand all our leaders are certainly not virtuous, but you see the absence of virtue when you have somebody that's a leader that's not necessarily concerned with doing the right thing. And I think we see that a lot today, unfortunately. And I think that's truly what that is sometimes that's a lack of courage, another virtue. It's the courage to do what is right. So you know, with politicians, I mean, many times they just acquiesce to whomever. So I don't want to go to politics.
I want to add just one thing. I think for me, kind of with interaction with people, dichotomy of control is the most powerful principle for me when dealing with other people, because it clearly specifies the limits. Right. It's because you have a tendency of saying, I feel this way, I want to do this way, why is this person not doing it? Understanding that, okay, this is a different person. You don't have, you know, I have control over what I have control over. I do not have control. That itself, that's like that mental setup, that kind of metaphysical principle, that their will is separate than my will. I think it sets me up at a much more kind of reasonable base to do everything else. It's not a good answer, but I think it's just a kind of precondition for me of dealing with people. All right, folks. So now it's time to kind of just do the wrap up. What did you guys think of the meetup? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark to give brief comments on what you thought of the meetups. Before we do that, I just want to tell you about the meetup that is DLJ gives a 5 on the scale to only 1 to 4. DLJ, I don't know how to interpret 5. The next up, but you are welcome to talk about it in speech if you want. So the next one coming up at 3:30, I'm going to be talking about this principle that keeps showing up in everything that we look at, the center and the periphery. It showed up in Bhagavad Gita. It showed up in the Gospel of John. It showed up in Tao Te Ching, and it is very much shows up in Stoicism. So just focus on that. I'm going to describe how exactly it showed up in each of those 4 places, and then I'm going to ask people to comment on that. So in terms of reactions to the meetup, Evanik, followed by Rupali and Laura. Evanik.
I thought it was amazing. I think because I know Joe, I know he lives this. Like, I know he lives this. So it had a personal impact on me. But I think he did an amazing job. I think it was just fabulous. And it made me want to learn more about Stoicism, just like the last meetup made me want to learn more about microbiome. So great job, Joe. I thought the format worked really well. And thank you, Shrikant, for allowing Joe to use this platform for leading the discussion.
I just wanted to talk to Joe, and I thought you will enjoy listening in and being part of the conversation. So thank you. It was wonderful.
Did.
Next up is going to be Rupali, Laura, Simone, Jeff, Cheryl, and Sharon. Try to keep your comments short so we can get through everybody. Rupali.
Thank you, Joe. If you said you were nervous before, well, I wonder what you are like when you're really cool and not nervous. Very well done. Thank you. I have been trying to practice temperance and the virtues of Stoicism in my work and in daily life. And thank you for helping me understand it more.
Thank you, Rupali. Next up is Laura, followed by Simone. Laura, what did you think?
It's given me food for thought, really. I think that thinking about the person who we deal virtue, non-virtuous, how do they perceive themselves to begin with to determine whether they feel virtuous or not is something I wonder. So you leave me with that as a question to think about. And I sort of think of myself, when I think I do things that are kind or whatever, or virtuous, I mean, that's just, I am who I am kind of things. And it's not yes or no, this or that, I gave, I didn't, so that also puts me, who am I on that side?
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Next up is going to be Simone, Jeff, Cheryl, Sharon, and Judy. Simone, what did you think of the meetup?
I loved it. And I think I'm in the medical field, Joe. Kudos to you. I don't use that word lightly. People in the military, and I say military because I live in a military town. Men don't usually talk about their feelings. Oh, sorry. And that's a problem, I think. And like I said, I'm not divorced, so I don't know anyone's experience but my friends.
Thank you. Thank you, Simone. We have to wrap up because we have a meetup coming up in 2 minutes. Next up is going to be Jeff, Sharon, and Judy. Jeff, what do you think?
Joe, I just want to say you're somebody who really embodies the significance of character, and it really comes through. And it came through, even in this just hour and a half, but it always comes through. And that regarding the session, I think that what you did was you actually achieved kind of a convergence of many of the 52 living ideas, which is quite a remarkable thing to do. And your orientation towards making it practical that it has to work, and it has to be able to be applied as among the true tests is very wise. And so I really appreciate this. And Shrikant, thanks for doing this with Joe.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Next up, and glad to have you here. It was wonderful getting your comments on this. Next up is Cheryl, followed by Sharon and Judy. Cheryl.
I just wanted to mention, Joe, that honesty and authenticity just come shining through. I don't know if they're Stoic principles or personal values, but you really exemplify those, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Next up is Sharon, followed by Judy. Sharon.
So I thought this was great, Joe. I would like to see more of these, Shrikant. I actually did the 52 living ideas with the handbook, which I thought was excellent, because what you get is a exercise every week. And you just read this chapter briefly, and then you actually can apply it for the whole week, and it's progressive, and it really teaches you how to become a Stoic. So it's a very broad topic, and I think it's a lifelong practice, and I would love to see more of these, Shrikant. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Folks, we're just wrapping up this meetup for people who have just come in, and then we will get on to the next one within a minute or two. Next up is Judy, followed by Hugo. Judy.
Okay, it left me with a smile in my face, and I wanted to remember something that my grandmother used to tell me was patience is a virtue, and virtue is a grace, and those who possess it possess a pretty face.
Judy, that's great. Now you have connections. Joe has connections with your grandson and
my grandmother.
Yes.
I learned a lot of virtues from her.
And you have a beautiful smile.
Wonderful.
Thank you. You too.
Last up is Hugo. Hugo, what did you think?
Yeah, thank you, Shrikant, and thanks again, Joe. Yeah, that was beautiful what Judy just said, and yeah, I wanna just finish by saying a quote by Epictetus that is beautifully can be applied to Joe, that says don't just say that you have read books, show that through them you have learned to think better. And that, I think that applies beautifully to Joe. I don't know Joe personally, but through the meetups, like everybody mentioned, yeah, he's a great guy, and I can say that to you as well, Shrikant, and everybody on this meetup as well.
Wonderful.
So thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. Well, Joe, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. We'll see you soon. We'll see you soon.
I'll see you in 2 minutes.
In about 15 seconds.